Hey everyone, it's Tyron Pretorius here from the Workflow Pro, and today I'm going to be walking you through how to streamline your Zaps and also talk a bit about the importance of why it's important to do so. One of the main reasons is when it comes to maintaining and editing your Zaps, the more streamlined they are, the easier this is. And I'll give you an example of this later on when I go through one of the very first Zaps I built, where maintaining all these different paths was a nuisance, and you'll see why later on. And then the second part of this is when you have inefficient Zaps that are using more tasks than necessary, then they're going to eat up your task allowance every month. So this will eventually lead to you exceeding that task threshold, meaning that critical Zaps you need to run can't run because you've exceeded your threshold. And you're also going to pay overages for any tasks that you have over your monthly threshold. So it can cost you money too, which is important. So for these two reasons, when it comes to reducing costs and also saving time, it's important to streamline your Zaps. So I'll start by walking through one of these very first Zaps that I created to show you how not to build a Zap. And then I'll show you ways that I optimize this Zap to make it more efficient, in terms of the amount of time it took to update and maintain, but also to reduce the number of tasks it was using every run. So the purpose of this first Zap is we've got different Slack channels where we send lead activity via Marketo. So this is an example where someone viewed our Better Twilio alternative ebook, and we can see that Colin is mentioned as the lead owner here. So the objective of this Zap is we want to parse the Slack message, see if there are any sales people mentioned within it. And if they are, then we want to tag them in the thread so they can follow up if necessary. So the first part of this Zap is we need to ensure that it triggers for bot messages, because these are the very things we want to trigger on, all the messages coming from Marketo. And then we only want to continue if username does not exist. And this means it was sent by a bot. We don't want this Zap to run when humans post in the Slack channel or in any of the threads of the channel, because this will cause this to run unnecessarily and use up tasks, which we don't want it to do. Then these next four steps are all the exact same, and they use the formatter by Zapier action to search the original Slack message for each of these regular expressions to try and find the account owner, the account SDR, the lead owner, and the lead SDR. So just to show you what we're searching for, it's going to search to see if there are any names present after these four colons here. And then once we've searched for the four lead and account owners, we then have some paths by Zapier logic to say, if we do find an account owner, then we're going to look up that owner's first name in Google Sheets. So in this example here, say the first name is Aoife. We're going to look up Aoife and find her Slack tag name. That's what step 9 does. And then we're going to send a message in Slack with Aoife's Slack tag name. And then she's going to be mentioned in the thread, the original message, so she can follow up. But then, as well as the account owner, we also want to tag any account SDRs or lead SDRs who are mentioned on that lead record. So then we have the exact same logic in here where we say, if the account SDR is found, look up their Slack tag name, send a message in the thread of the original message to tag them. Then lead SDR is the same. If lead SDR is present, and in this case, we want to make sure account SDR is not present because we don't want to tag them both at the same time, then look up their Slack tag name and then tag them in the thread of the original message. And this is if we have an account owner. If we don't have an account owner, then we repeat those steps. In this case, there's no account owner, so we don't need to do a lookup or a Slack message here. But then these steps are the exact same from the other main path. We look up the Slack tag name. We send a channel message in Slack for the account SDR if they're present. If they're not present, then we do the same for the lead SDR. And to my earlier point about maintaining Zaps, you can see that these actions, the Google Sheet lookup and send message in Slack, are the exact same in a lot of these paths. So if I want to say change something in this Google Sheet action here or add another action in, I have to repeat this across all these subpaths, which is it's a real pain. I've had to do it a few times. So I'll show you how to remove the need to have all these paths by Zapier using Python code. So before I dive into that, I'm just going to show you the easy part first, which is here we've got 4 parsing steps, and these will use up 4 tasks every time the Zap runs. The first step in the Python code is it's going to search for a mention of an account owner, SDR, lead owner, or lead SDR in the Slack message using Python regex. So all these 4 actions are now done in a single Python action, which reduces tasks, which is fantastic. And then to find their Slack tag names, we have a backend sheet here. So it's a slightly different approach from before, where we've got 2 concatenated strings, which concatenate all the first names and all the Slack tags from this front end sheet. And then we bring that in with this Google Sheets action. We bring both those concatenated strings in, and then in our Python code, we split those strings by the delimiting character, which in this case is an asterisk, and we obtain 2 parallel lists of all the first names and all the tag names. And what I mean by parallel lists are at index 5 for the first name of Aoife. If we look at index 5 in T names here, that will return the tag name for Aoife. That's what I mean by parallel lists. So once we search the text for account owner, SDRs, SDRs, lead owners, lead SDRs, then the next step is we're going to take the output of all these 4 searches, and we're going to iterate through each of those 4. And if they're not already present in the message and they're not empty, then we will add that person's Slack tag name to the message we're going to send at the end of this Zap. So if that message is populated, that means that there are people to tag. We'll only continue if this is the case. And then in step 6, we're going to send the message obtained from step 4 in the original thread of the main message. So before, what it looked like was we'd send one message in the thread if we find an account owner, then we'd send another message if we find an account SDR or a lead SDR, or if there's no owner, then we'd only send a message if there was an account SDR or a lead SDR. So all this branching logic contained in step 7 can now be removed, because in this Python logic, we no longer need to use paths by Zapier, because this for loop, which searches through the output of the 4 searches from here, it adds all the necessary Slack tag names to a single message, and then we'll tag all these people using a single message in step 6. So this way, there's no need to have any of these paths, which makes our Zap much easier to maintain, and it'll also use less tasks. And then if we want to take it one step further, I'll call this the advanced version. What we can do is we can incorporate the filter from step 2 here and from step 5, along with the sending of the Slack message, into the Python step as well. So filter number 2 to say only continue if the message was sent by a bot. This gets incorporated into the Python code here. If input username is empty, then continue and do all the actions from before. Since there's no else statement, that means else we're going to do nothing, which is what happens the exact same here. If it doesn't meet the condition, this app stops immediately. So we've replicated this filter action with Python code. And then we do the same as before. we obtain the first name and tag names lists in Python. We search for account owners and SDRs. We then accumulate the output of these 4 searches in this list, and then we'll loop through this list. And if the output of the searches is not empty, that means we found an SDR or an account owner, and their Slack tag name is not already present in the message, then we're going to add that Slack tag name to the message. And then in step 5, where previously we had only continue if there's someone to tag, this has been incorporated into the Python code as well to say, if the message is not empty, then continue and send a Slack message to this URL. And this is the URL of the channel in which the original message was posted. And we can see that in the payload here, we're specifying the message to tag all the salespeople that we populated from above. The one thing to note about using this webhook option, and I mentioned this in my original post, is that when you use Python within Zapier, it doesn't allow you to import custom modules, such as those offered by Slack. So ideally, if we could import these modules, then we could post this message using Python in the thread of the original Slack message. But since we can't import these custom modules, the message we send using Python will be in the main channel along with the original notification. So that's one downside to doing it this way. If you really want to tag people within the thread of the original message, then you're going to have to use the Slack app to do so. And just in another point, if you want to use these actions, say from step 3 to step 6 across multiple other Zaps, so for example in Telnex, where I work at the moment, we've got this exact same Zap replicated for different channels. We've got one for inbound form fills, we've got one for content downloads, we've got one for things called shortcode requests, and we've got another one that I can't remember at the moment. So we've got these exact same actions replicated across 4 Zaps. So if I want to change this action here, then it's most likely I'm going to need to change it across the 3 other Zaps as well. So in cases like these, it's more efficient to use sub-Zaps. So in this case, we get the trigger to the original channel, only continue if the message was sent by a bot. And then these 4 actions here are all encapsulated within this sub-Zap. So we get the Slack tag names from the Google Sheet. We parse the owners, prepare the Slack message. We return from the sub-Zap. We only continue if there's someone to tag, and then we tag the owner in the thread of the original message. So now I can use this sub-Zap across all 4 of the main Zaps I have to monitor the channels in Slack. And then if I need to make a change in this sub-Zap, it'll be reflected automatically whenever the other 4 main Zaps call this Zap. So I can make changes in one place as opposed to having to make them in 4 different Zaps. So I hope you've learned something today. Just to summarize what I went over, and just to summarize some of the achievements we can have. So the very first Zap here, we had 4 formatted by Zapier actions, which you were able to replace within this single Python action, which was fantastic. And then we were also able to take all this pass by Zapier complexity and remove that once again by using conditional logic and a for loop in Python. And then if you want to take things one step further, you can remove this filter and step 6, all using Python code again. So then you go from how many? You go from 7+ actions here with lots of paths to just 6 actions and no paths, and then you can reduce this even further to just being 3 simple tasks. So not only have you reduced the number of tasks that this Zap is using, but it's also much easier for you to maintain. You can now just edit a single Python step or a single Google Sheet step in one place and not have to fiddle around with making edits in each path used within Paths by Zapier. And if you want to learn a bit more about how to use sub-zaps, if you do want to go with an approach like this and take all these repetitive actions and put them in a sub-zap, if you want to learn more about that, then I link to the sub-zap by Zapier post within this blog. So if you come to the 3 ways to reduce Zapier high task use, that will summarize everything I've covered in this video. And then if you want to learn more about how to use sub-zaps and make maintaining your zaps even easier, I've got a blog post on that as well. So I hope you've learned something from this video. If you have any questions, comment down on YouTube below. Come into theworkflowpro.com. Leave comments on some of these posts. I've never had a non-spam comment here before, so I'd love to get some interaction here. And the same with on this post. Leave some comments, get in touch, let me know what you think. And if you're enjoying the content, subscribe here on YouTube or subscribe to the blog to know when I release new posts. Thanks very much. Have a great day.